We are back talking hoops, football, hockey, from back in the day when we did it at Nedick's. And Nedick's by the Garden, by the way. It was 48th Street Garden. Those were wonderful days of talking sports, especially winter sports like we're trying to cover here. The hosts are Alan Blumkin. I'm Ralph Tyko, by the way, from Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Alan Blumkin and Hal Bock, gentlemen experiencing New York storms these days. How are you?
Spring is on the way. Don't think it's going to stay like this. It's going to be spring in a week.
That's the funny part. What we're talking off the air, it was spring 2 weeks ago in New York. And you were experiencing nicer and warmer weather than I was in California. And since then, the worm has turned. We've had spring here, and I'm just getting adjusted to nice 70-degree days and what you were having. And all of a sudden, you have this, as Alan said, or Hal said before, the storm of the century. Could it be that, indeed?
We had
is this the
82. We had a monstrous snowstorm in the first week of April that wiped out in the Northeast and the Midwest. It wiped out basically the first week of the baseball season. And of course, they had the schedule at that point where the Western teams were playing Western teams, Dome teams were playing Dome teams. And they had about half the games wiped out for about a week. And next year they had every opening game, in warm weather as much as they could, and nothing happened. So in 1984 they went back to the old setup.
And like they're not going to average it out.
No.
Baseball is very silly sometimes.
Pirates open in Fenway on April 3rd.
Why? Yeah, you wonder why.
A natural rivalry, right?
Oh yeah, they're bringing up.
Yeah, but
they're bringing up Cy Young and Honus Wagner to throw out the first ball.
That's what makes interleague play so stupid, as far as I'm concerned. Because sure, you have natural rivalries. The Mets and the Yankees, certainly. The Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros, sure, for sure. The Giants and
A's,
Dodgers, absolutely.
for instance, is a good one.
But they force this on us, and there are not all those natural rivalries. It's foolishness. Why they can't play a regular season the way they did, I don't understand.
You play it. You play one of the opposite divisions, and it's only one series, so you're either on the road or at home for it. And even when you're in the same division, you don't play the same schedule because your interleague partner, the one that you play the 4 games with, is different.
That's really unfair.
I could go on to this forever, but I don't want to. But the whole baseball scheduling is totally insane.
Yeah, no question.
That's not the only thing in baseball that's insane, Alan. Now they're going to start.
Yeah, they're talking about rule changes now,
base.
and they're greasing the way for some bad things in the future.
Oh yeah.
Just with the idea of speeding things up, and other sports have rule changes too. Well, to me, the most drastic rule change in sport was the 24-second clock. That was so instrumental in basketball.
Yeah, it was also...
What rules, just off the top of your head, can you think of in football that
Ralph,
changed?
before we leave basketball, one of the team limit on fouls in the quarter was also put in the same time with the 24-second rule. And that eliminated the constant fouling that you had in the NBA. There was a playoff game the year before they put the clock and the foul rules in. Bob Cousy scored 50 points in a playoff game, and 30 of them were from the free throw line.
Well, 24-second clock revolutionized basketball.
That was combined with the foul limitations.
Excuse me. The fact that, you had to shoot the ball every 24 seconds gave the team that was behind an opportunity to catch up. So, it revolutionized the game.
I don't like it. I've never been a fan of the three. I don't like it.
No, I agree with you.
But I just don't like it at all.
It's because it was a novelty when they introduced it, but it's become now everybody wants to shoot the three. So you have a game. It's a different game. There's no driving to the hoop. There's no, there's none of that old-fashioned basketball.
No.
And I don't like it. I don't like the constant bombing away from beyond that three-point line. But not my call.
Not mine either. Yeah.
It is an amazing skill, though, to shoot accurately from that far out. Credit has to be given.
Steph Curry, right?
Yeah. That's got started in the old ABA. We've talked on this program a bit about how innovative, you might say, whether you like it or not, change. It does bring a certain excitement to the game, as witnessed by the three-point shootout that they have. It's like the home run, equivalent to that. And I don't like that either. If that's all you're concentrating on is the home run, and getting a guy over from first to second loses all credibility whatsoever. In other words, you can't. They don't look at a ball player in terms of his intangibles like they used to. The little skills that win ball games. Because the home run is so massive.
That's what fascinates me about the game. That's why I prefer National League baseball, because they often play small ball in National League games. They'll bunt players over, they'll steal bases, stuff like that. The American League, they just hang back and wait for the three-run homer. And, you either get it or you don't get it. But
Yankees signed a player from who played last year in Milwaukee and before that played with Houston named Chris Carter. He's a first baseman who, among his accomplishments in his 5-year career, and I looked this up because I did a tirade on Facebook against him, several weeks ago. The guy has 499 career hits, 875 strikeouts. He had 41.
Twice as many strikeouts as hits.
More errors than any first baseman in the major leagues. They're paying.
And he's making $3 million.
$3.5 million. Yeah.
So
what do you suppose? Was it the 41 home runs that he hit?
But
that got
every home run you're going to get 7. You're going to get 6 strikeouts.
Yes.
All or nothing, right?
Yeah. And he's not the only one, but he's the most. Right now, he's the most prolific at doing that. And I put down one of the things that says the problem with having guys like this in your roster is you're tempted to play them. Also, don't forget, they've built the ballparks to encourage long balls and home runs. Oh, yeah. The fences are closer than they've ever been, and they encourage that. They want the home runs. They're playing to the fan base, which I certainly can understand. The same thing that goes in hockey. That's why you have the hockey shootout, because what's the most exciting play in hockey? The penalty shot. Yeah. When it's me against you. Let's see you stop me. Well, now they've got the shootout to settle all the tie games, and they've diminished the uniqueness of the penalty shot because you see so many shootouts. If I were a goalie, I think I'd protest about shootouts. But they play to the fan base. They know the fans love that stuff, so that's why they do it. They had a little item in one of the magazines I get called The Week about a hockey game in Norway that went 8 overtimes.
Whoa.
So that's okay with me.
Yes,
I paid my money to see hockey, play hockey.
Yeah. I remember watching I think it was Islanders in Washington. That went 4 overtimes.
Yes. Listen, guys,
I saw the Knicks
that went 25 innings.
Yeah.
25 innings.
I saw the
Philadelphia
Warriors in Wilt's first year.
I was there for 8 innings.
Triple overtime.
I watched till the 7th, 8th inning.
And that was the interesting part of that game was it was a 3-1 game in the 9th inning with 2 out. Yeah. And Ken Obergefell, I think it was, or I think it was Obergefell, hit a 2-run homer against Jerry Kuzman to tie the game with 2 out in the 9th inning. Yeah. And we played 25 that night.
Yeah, because I left after the 8th inning because I had to go to work. I got home, I watched through the 7th, 8th, and I gave up. And then they were showing Kiner sleeping in where did the Kiner's corner.
Yeah.
Came into the quarter after 3 in the morning.
Exactly. I walked in the house at 5 o'clock. My wife says, "Where have you been?"
Hey,
you won't believe this, honey.
Could she believe you?
Yes, she did.
You won't believe me till you see the paper the next day.
That's right.
Right.
Because
fully believe me. She believed you, but she didn't fully believe you.
She knew that I was an honest guy. That's why we've been married over
National. We had the guy who was the official scorer of that Pawtucket-Rochester game that went 33 innings.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he said that there were a couple of ball players that, because there was no authority to stop the game, and they finally called it like 4 in the morning. A couple of players went home, and as I said, their wives didn't believe them.
Well, ball players are different from sports writers.
Yeah. And fans, too. I'll tell you, my story is when it must have been 60 or 61, Wilt's first year. He and the Philadelphia Warriors is probably 59. So I'm 13, going to a game with Mert from the Associated Press, who you got to meet, Hal Bock. And we don't have great seats. We're up in the rafters, but we are watching the Knicks and Jumpin' Johnny Green up against Wilt in a triple overtime game. And the Knicks won a triple overtime game against Wilt. We were 13. The only phones were at Nedick's. They were all filled up. We came home much later as little kids, allowed to go out to a game alone. Scared the crap out of our parents that night. But it's a good memory. We were up in the rafters and the end rafters, and I can still see those guys competing in my mind's eye as if it were yesterday. Wilt was dynamic when he came into the league. He absolutely, speaking of causing rule changes, expanded the lanes. And what's amazing when I think back about Wilt, and I want you guys to give me memories of him that you experienced, he never, ever fouled out of a basketball game in the NBA. That's an amazing stat to me.
It is.
Gentlemen, what do you remember about Wilt?
I met Wilt once. I did an interview with him one time, and it was him and me. And I walked up to him, and I'm a big guy, but I came up to maybe halfway up his chest, and he was looming over me, and it was very intimidating. You know, it's like you have to shout the questions up high so that he could hear you and he could shout down to you. You know, he was an amazing athlete. He revolutionized the game. He and Russell. I did an interview with Bill Russell one time. A fascinating guy. I sat with Russell for 2.5 hours, and I could have gone another 2.5 hours, believe me. And he talked a lot about the rivalry that he had with Chamberlain, and it was fascinating stuff, just terrific.
they respected each other to no end.
Oh, without question. But it was a great, it was a great rivalry. It was a great showdown between the two of them every time they played.
I often think, were their teammates reversed, what would have happened? How things would have played out? In other words, if Wilt played on Boston with all those guys, and Russell played on the teams that, the Lakers and the Warriors, the teams that Wilt played on, wonder how things would have been.
I think the results would have been the same because the surrounding cast on both of those teams were terrific players. They were all stars. They were Hall of Famers. I mean, you run down the roster, there's a lot of guys on that Celtic team that are in the Hall of Fame, and the same goes for the Laker teams. So I think the results probably would have been the same. They would have negated each other out.
Good point.
I remember
Celtics was so deep. That's what
I had
depth.
come in from college in March of 1962 for a weekend, something I needed to take care of. So I come in and I'm sleeping. I wake up the Saturday morning, and my brother comes in to me. He says, Chamberlain got 100 last night. I said, what you expected me to say? You're full of it. And he said, no.
My reaction would have
been 100 watts. In Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And then he showed me.
That was a cold February day.
Yeah, cold was March. It was the first weekend in March. And,
was it March? Okay.
And he shows me a post. And the post had, in the boxing results, they had Chamberlain 100 KO'd Knicks last night. Boxing results. They threw it every article they did in the paper says, that they were KO'd by Chamberlain that night. And it was, I figured that the Knicks would be the ones he would do it against.
The irony is that happened in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Guy Rogers had 20 assists.
And there's no video.
No, he made 20.
And another irony is that the Knicks player, Will was living in New York at the time, so the Knicks players, Johnny Green, Richie Guerin, Imhoff, they got in a car with Wilt after the game and drove him to New York. I mean, the NBA was very informal in those days. Like
the other irony, Ralph, Chamberlain was a terrible foul shooter, but in that game he made 28 foul shots, 28 of 32. So a lot of his points came from the free throw line.
Yeah, and Alvin Addles had a great game. I got to meet Alvin Addles, who served on the board of advisors of a nonprofit that I put together out here in California a number of years ago. And he was a terrific guy, and just their whole idea was get Wilt the ball.
Guy Rogers had 20 assists. And Paul Harrison scored 21. Paul Harrison, who was a terrific ball player, retired after that season because he had business interests in Philadelphia and didn't want to move out to San Francisco with them.
And he played in the Eastern Basketball League when he retired.
Yeah.
He kept playing for a year or two. I think it was at the EBL, whatever it was, almost like a semi-pro.
That was a weekend league.
That
basically.
You know who else played in that league? Jim Boeheim,
Alan
coach
Fishman.
at Syracuse University.
Oh, really?
He fell short of being an NBA player, but he played in the EBL and then came back to Syracuse to become coach.
Yep. Syracuse used to come into Pittsburgh to play Pitt every year because they played home and home. Back in the day when they were both independents. And I saw Boeheim was played with Dave Bing.
Sure.
I saw him play a couple of times when he came into Pittsburgh.
Oh, Dave Bing was an inordinately successful man. outside of basketball. He made a lot of bucks. I don't
took Cassie Russell
how.
ahead of him.
Yeah.
Cassie had
and
the NBA.
How does Dave Bing compare to guys that we talked about? Great guards, Sam Jones, Earl Monroe. Dave Bing was right up there, wasn't he, guys?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of high-quality players who came along in that era, of the Nedick era, if you will. There were some terrific players. I mean, you could run down rosters, up and down rosters, and these were guys who were really terrific ball players. That made it a lot of fun for me, certainly.
Yeah,
to watch the NBA in those days.
So you didn't have as many teams. So you didn't have as many players who, you know, back then couldn't make rosters as the way you do now.
Marginal players.
Because there's 30 teams now.
Hey, I thought of something last week, and I'm glad I rethought of it again. I didn't write it down, but it comes to mind. Did you guys read the basketball edition each year of Jet Magazine?
No.
You guys remember that? The Jet Magazine put out an edition where they would give stories about the blacks coming into the NBA at that time. Very little known colleges like Barnett came from a little college in Tennessee, and Ben Worley, I remember reading articles of
Sam Jones and Earl Monroe came out of very small colleges.
Right, and we as fans, as kids, knew nothing about these players, and I remember getting a lot of information on Jet Magazine's annual issue covering all the blacks coming in.
I remember my reaction when the Celtics drafted Sam Jones. I said to a friend of mine, "Who the heck is he?" Well, we found out.
Yes.
And, of course, K.C. Jones, who was Russell's teammate at San Francisco, University of San Francisco.
I love Sam Jones. I thought he was great. I thought he was one of the greatest clutch players I've ever seen.
There were a hatful of them.
Indeed.
There were a hatful of them. They were just terrific players in that era. That's a special time in basketball history. It really is.
Right. The guard I was thinking of was Greer. Was another
Hal
really
Greer,
terrific.
Sure.
Hal Greer.
No, I think he played Marshall. Hal Greer.
That's right. That's right. Cleo Hill was a guy that broke in with St. Louis, and I think he might have been a number one draft choice. And he was basically drummed out by guys like Pettit and Lavella, Claude Lavelle, Cliff Hagan. They were a bunch of racists, from what I understand. And
really, I never heard that.
They kept the ball away from him. He was a shooting guard. I thought you guys could shed some light on that.
Well, the first black player, they were the last all-white team when they beat the Celtics in Russell's second year because Russell came down with an injury in the finals. And they were the last all-white team to win an NBA championship and will be, obviously, for the foreseeable future. I think the first black player that ever succeeded there was Lenny Wilkins.
Yes, from Providence.
And Brooklyn. He went to
Boys High. And as we transcend sports, I think one of his teammates on that Boys High team was Tommy Davis.
Yes, exactly. You're right, yeah.
Great outfielder with the Dodgers, who he was one of those guys like Tony Oliva. Had Tommy Davis not hurt his knee,
he broke his
ankle, whatever it
broke
was.
His ankle in 1965 sliding into a base. That was it. He was never really after that.
He was fast, almost as fast as Willie.
Yeah, he won 2 straight batting titles in 62 and 63.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
the worst part about following sports is the what ifs. Guys who are hurt or sick. I wonder what Sam or Tommy Stiff might have been as a pro. He was supposed to be very Baylor-like in his skills, which probably overstated. But still, he was an All-American, and Knicks got him, and he had tuberculosis. But that's the frustrating part for me as a sports fan. All these guys. Mantle comes to mind. Can you imagine if Mantle had not stepped in that hole in the 1951 World Series when DiMaggio called him off in center, or if he had been inclined to rehab and take care of himself a little more, you could say that too. Who knows? We might be talking about him like they talk about Babe Ruth.
Mantle was afraid that he was going to come down with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which killed his father, a couple of his uncles, I think one of his brothers, and 2 of his sons.
Yeah. He always liked to say, if I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys that meant it. He didn't think he would live past 40 and lived his life
he was
accordingly.
68 to 63. And so Chamberlain, I remember when I heard that Chamberlain passed away in 1999 at the age of 63, I was shocked because I thought he was indestructible.
Absolutely. That was, I always remember where I heard that J.T. DeBrick did a sports, I don't know if you guys get him, a syndicated sports guy. And I remember he announced, I was listening to his show, and he announced it, and I was just chilled. How can this mammoth guy be taken so early?
Life has a way of throwing curveballs sometimes.
Yes, indeed. You say that, I'm going to tell you guys both a funny story that I heard on an interview I did with a guy named Clyde Depner. He's the Minnesota Twins official historian and collector. And he tells we're talking about some of the things that he had, given that Washington was when the opening day was celebrated and the first game, presidents would throw out the first ball. And he's got a letter from Harry Truman, who hated Nixon for obvious reasons, but despised him. There's a letter in his collection addressed to Clark Griffith. He says, I'm no longer president, and Richard Nixon will be throwing out the first ball this year. Make sure he doesn't throw a curveball.
He threw a few.
Imagine having that letter in your collection from Harry Truman to Clark Griffith, warning him, make sure he doesn't throw a curveball. Great way. I thought that was tremendous. I wanted to talk a little bit, because it is spring training, and Hal wanted to talk about, in relationship to that, is spring training too long, too short? Is it just right? I want to know the other sports. What are the correlations between baseball spring training and preseason in football, hockey, basketball? There isn't that, spring training. Everybody is tuned in to what games are going on. You don't get that with other sports. There isn't the excitement.
There's a couple of things involved here. First of all, I think after winter, people are anxious to get finished with winter. People want it to be spring and baseball, and all of that comes together. So I think that's a major part of it. For the ball clubs, I believe that they use spring training largely to sell tickets. You don't need 6 weeks to get ready for the baseball season. You really don't. I mean, I used to go out and play ball after school,
Right.
Now, I'm not a major leaguer. I was not a major leaguer, but nevertheless, you could do it. You could get out there and play with a lot less than 6 weeks preparation. They use spring training to drum up the season, to market their clubs for the regular season, to sell tickets. And I think it's successful by and large, or else we wouldn't have 6 weeks of this.
It's become much more commercialized.
Oh, yeah. And people are so anxious for that to be over with. Let's get going. Let's start the season. So that's my view of that.
Okay. How about the other sports with their preseasons?
Football, they televise all the games, and they weed out the players from the roster. And 1 year, I decided when there was 14 regular season and 6 exhibition games. This is in the early 70s. I watched a lot of exhibition football, and I found out by November I was burned out. So I don't watch exhibition games of any sort at all anymore. But football, they're on. They put point spreads on them when you don't even know who's playing, especially in the early games. More than the quarter, they put point spreads out. They put overs and unders out. And people who actually bet this nonsense.
Yeah, betting a preseason football game has got to be crazy.
It is. But
the players that you see on the field, other than wearing the uniform of your team, they do not resemble your team. They're extra hands who are trying to make the team, but they're not the stars and they're not the real roster players. Certainly for the last game, when they don't want anybody to get injured, you're seeing a bunch of wannabes, really, So, I mean, that's, again, they're selling tickets. That's what they're doing.
Exactly.
What I'd like to know is how are the odds determined? How are the numbers determined?
They know. They know. They know who's playing. They know who's not playing. And in the old days, they used to play exhibition games all over the place. I refer to them as preseason. I never have. It's a term I don't like. It's like pre-owned cars and used cars. And now they play 2 of them at home, and I guess the most season ticket holders, they have to buy them as part of the package.
I'll tell you a funny story about that. At the AP, we used to call those games exhibition games.
Yeah, they are.
And well, yeah, sure they are. The National Football League complained because they thought that there was a bad connotation to exhibition games. They prefer that we call them preseason games. And now they are all called preseason games. But that shows you how sensitive the league is to...
I know, yeah. And baseball...
The rhetoric. It's just the rhetoric, how it sounds.
Baseball
come out.
Yeah. It's like calling used cars and now pre-owned cars.
That's right. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
With all that, though, comes a tremendous amount of pressure for the players coming up in spring training. And, for instance, in all sports, in preseason, for instance, a guy like Johnny Havlicek was the last cut, from what I understand, of the Cleveland Browns. And that, he couldn't have been half as successful had he made the Browns as he would have been, as he was in basketball. So it's amazing how lives are determined, and with this exhibition, this, that, and the other thing, fair, unfair, a lot of players get their chances and earn their stripes in spring training and preseason. So it does serve its purpose from an evaluation standpoint. You would think teams have a longer the spring, they have a longer period of time to look at the players, this, that, and the other thing. This year's an anomaly with the World Baseball Classic. Players are from every team are playing on their respective countries' team, except Israel. There's no real baseball players in Israel, which leads us to talk about the balance of power in that tournament itself. Mostly American players playing. Some have very, very tedious ties to Judaism, yet they're on the team. And why should it be just Judaism? Israel, should you have Arab players playing for Israel too when you stop to think about it? Not if it's a one-state country, but that's another talk for another time. And I don't think three Jew boys can be very objective about that kind of talk. So we'll forego it. We'll forego it. I'm just thinking that's a good idea off the top of my head. Gentlemen, this has been a good show. I've enjoyed chatting with you as I always do. You guys have anything to add to it before we sign off?
No.
Anything in your
no,
mind?
just bring on the regular season, please. Bring on the regular season. I'm tired of exhibitions or preseason or whatever you want to call them. I want the regular season to begin.
Well, I got the NCAA basketball to cover the span until the regular season starts.
Yeah.
Yes, it is March Madness, and not something I think about much. But to each their own. Enjoy it when you can, and thank you, Alan. As you say, same time next week, same bat channel. Did I get it right?
Time, same bat channel, yeah.
Look forward to it.
Okay, take
Thank
care.
you, gentlemen. See you next week.
Good night.
Everybody out there, keep on keeping on. Adios.
Bye.